Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our work session of Tuesday, March 8th. Can I have a motion to open the work session, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Jill?
Okay, thank you, everybody. So the first thing on our agenda tonight is the Hudson Ridge Wellness Center update. Sabrina's here to give the board an update as to exactly the status of the application in Cortland and what we think our next steps should be. Sabrina, thanks for joining us.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Hudson Ridge Wellness, as you are most likely familiar with, is a project to repopulate an existing hospital that was discontinued in the town of Cortland. It affects the town of Newcastle. We've been watching it for years. It's been ongoing in the town of Cortland. And we have been attending, it's not an existing hospital. It is a vacant site right now, but it has existing buildings on it. I'm sorry about that. The existing buildings are to be repurposed to house a hospital. That is before the Cortland Planning Board and the Cortland Zoning Board of Appeals. The project has been going through the permitting process in the town of Cortland, and we have been watching it from a staff level regarding its impacts in Newcastle. One of the main impacts is traffic. Last week, there was a meeting whereby we attended the meeting, and it was decided that the town of Cortland, or that the planning board, will be considering making an environmental determination at their April 5th meeting. And then sending the applicant to the Zoning Board of Appeals to contemplate a variance in regards to locating a hospital on a town road rather than a state roadway. You have before you a draft of a letter that I had written for you to make the town of Cortland, both the town board, the planning board, and the Zoning Board of Appeals, aware of information that we are still seeking regarding traffic. Specifically, the applicant is proposing that 60% of the employees who are non-professional employees use a shuttle service. And so we had asked for more information regarding that shuttle service and understanding how the shuttle would operate, the hours it would operate, and really trying to get a handle as to whether or not it is for certain that there would not be additional cars on the road other than what they are saying. So we're still waiting on that information, and we think it's a good idea for the town to go on record asking for that information. I did have a conversation with the Cortland town planner who said that he envisions it to be before the Cortland Zoning Board of Appeals for several hearings as they grapple with the variance issue.
Now, this matter has also been very closely followed by the Millwood West End Advisory Board. Nicole Richey and members of her board are here this evening as well.
And thank you. I know you've been attending those meetings as well, so thank you.
Did they give any indication? I know the draft letter asks for information about distance it will travel, but is there any indication of is it like a park and ride kind of thing, or is it going to pick people up in different? We have no idea. They just said shuttle.
They just said shuttle, and I am making an assumption that it is coming from the train station. I'm not sure if it's a park and ride situation. That's the level of detail that we're asking for.
And Sabrina, I have a question. You mentioned mostly traffic, but there are other issues as well, right? Groundwater, stormwater, for instance.
Well, none of them stormwater. So there's no groundwater connection based on preliminary hydrologic analysis, called a trace analysis. There's no connection to any existing wells surrounding the area. Very much like the work that was done in Sunshine Children's Home, I believe this applicant is also going to be doing off-site monitoring of groundwater wells. There are 2 existing wells on the site right now that they will be monitoring. This project contains two different properties. One property where the buildings and all the development is located is in the town of Cortland. The adjacent property is a natural property. There's no development on it in Newcastle, which this applicant has committed to leaving vacant. So there's no development proposed in Newcastle. As far as stormwater is concerned, we had questions about stormwater runoff. It does not look as if there will be any impacts of stormwater if it was to leave the site to Newcastle. In accordance with state regulations, they are required to control the stormwater on site.
Okay, and can you talk about wetlands considerations? I know that there's a difference between the towns regarding buffer zones. Is this something that
Again,
should be considered?
there's no development on the property in the town of Newcastle where we would employ a 100-foot wetland setback. Cortland, I can't speak to what their regulations are, but because there's no development that is proposed in Newcastle, we don't have a concern with it impacting wetlands in Newcastle.
Okay, I'm asking because one concern I did read about was that Cortland has a 100-foot buffer zone and Newcastle has a 150 buffer zone.
Yes.
Why was that part of the memo if it's not of concern?
Because we were uncertain as to the treatment of how they would be treating that buffer.
Okay.
And Sabrina, we had, I believe, asked for them to consider putting a deed restriction on the Newcastle property, saying that it would remain undeveloped. Have you heard anything, any response to that?
To my understanding is that was a request of the Millwood West End Advisory Board. I have not heard anything from the town of Cortland or the applicant that they are willing to do such. As far as they have committed, as long as the hospital use is permitted on the Cortland property, that the property in Newcastle would remain untouched.
Right, but
Yeah, well,
I think
what
we
form
should
is
put, we should
form
push
is the
that.
commitment?
I don't, right, what?
Yeah, that
are
is
we
absolutely
trusting
up
them
to
that
you.
they're not going to do that? I think we should push for that deed restriction if we can.
Absolutely. Again, this is a draft letter for you based on, what staff have been charged with and what we've been seeing. If the town board wishes to add that as a request, by all means, we can incorporate that into your draft letter.
Yes, I think we
good
should. And also, I know we've also asked, obviously, for traffic analysis because even if they're not developing on the Newcastle property, we're going to have significant traffic,
Yes.
we believe, through Newcastle. So
Yes, we've
have
asked
we
them to
gotten
explain that.
right, and have we gotten appropriate analysis and response from them? I thought we hadn't.
Initially, we did not. They then did additional traffic analyses, and the shuttle information is key to understanding what that analysis means for our town.
Yeah, I think I would expand it though to say we want not just that shuttle analysis, but, additional analysis on traffic because how many people are going to take, I don't know that they're going to require people to take that. Certainly people are going to be visiting those medical facilities, so we want to make sure we push to get all of that traffic analysis done.
Right, and we received all of the traffic analysis that they did. The mitigation for the traffic is that shuttle service, and we just do not have enough information as to how that shuttle service will operate around the clock, who it will serve. And I do believe that they're asking for an adjustment in parking requirements due to the shuttle service. So it's essential that that information is provided.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm a little wary of that because I think that even if they can require employees to use that shuttle service, I think that they can't require visitors to use that shuttle
No,
service.
the intention is that visitors are not using the shuttle.
Right.
There's professional staff and visitors who will be driving to the site.
Right.
And that is stated in the information that is associated with this application. So we have requested more information regarding the shuttle service because it plays right into the amount of traffic that could be coming and driving on our roads in our
Right.
neighborhoods.
Right,
And we have yet to get that information.
okay.
So the January 28th summary still applies, right? That's the one?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, got it. That's the information we currently have on traffic.
Correct.
Yep,
Okay.
thanks.
All right. Any other questions for Sabrina?
Anyone from the Millwood West End Advisory Board have any questions or? Sure.
Hi, Nicole Roche, Overlook Road, Chair of Millwood West End Advisory Board. And it's good to be here. It's been 2 years since I've been in this room, although I've been on Zoom, as you know. So the Millwood West End Advisory Board sent a letter to the previous town board back in October, and we were November, and we were very pleased that that letter in turn was sent to the Cortland Planning Board. That was great. And I did, once the new board was inaugurated, sent you all a copy of that letter too, because I wasn't sure if you'd had an opportunity to see it. So in that letter, I'm not going to say again everything that was in it, but our main concerns were the traffic, but there's also lighting, and the issue of the Indian Brook watershed. And the other thing, and I really appreciate what you were saying, Lisa, because I have real concerns about
They're optional, you can take it off if you want to
okay.
talk.
About accountability and, even in one of the reports, I don't know if it was Sabrina's report, about the erosion controls. We've all been by the roads where the orange fences are falling down and the straw bales are all falling apart. So, things like that, how they're going to be accounted for. And I also quite frankly, I don't trust the shuttle suggestion at all, especially since they haven't made any or gotten any okays from any of the sites that they say that they're going to shuttle people from. Croton Harmon Railroad Station, FDR Park, kind of all over. So, and the other thing is I have spent many hours in this room, many years in this room, and I have seen one applicant after another when they have been granted their variance or special permit or whatever, and they don't follow through. And, I can go back 50 years and tell you about some, and I won't mention the name of the company, but who are not abiding by the mitigating proposals that they had given the community. And who remembers that now? I do. But, and so I appreciate what you were saying about, making sure everything is, we have the details on everything. And Sabrina, I had a question for you. Like when you said you had asked the Cortland Planning Board about more information on the traffic, is that, like, did you write them a letter or is it talking to Chris Kehoe or?
It's both. It's both. I've had regular conversations with Chris Kehoe. We've submitted the staff communications to the board. We've reviewed the information. We've talked with the traffic consultant. We try and get as much information as we possibly can.
And then, of course, the other thing is, like you were saying, is about deed restricting the property, because if should this application get their variance and their site plan review, and they're a great success, then down the road they may say, hey, we want to, expand on the Newcastle property, which is much larger than the Cortland property, right? Cortland's 20 acres, Newcastle is 27.83 acres. So anyway, that having been said, thank you all for your service, but I did ask David Valdez, who lives on Glendale Road, to make a couple of comments on behalf of the advisory board.
Did it, good job.
Yeah, we'll take it off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Michelle. So, number one, thanks very much to every member of this committee and this board in terms of the questions and this Q&A. We really appreciate it. As Michelle said, I'm on the Millwood West End Advisory Board. It is a great opportunity to have a forum to talk to all the neighbors. Something new that I would just like to introduce in polling the residents and the people that we've gotten to know on Glendale, they're very, very, very concerned because, in fact, to get to and from a hospital, imagine ambulances and all the rest, it's all through Newcastle and on one section through Austining. So it's not like, I mean, you have to come through Newcastle to get there. The neighbors, I can think of two specifically, said, we are selling our home. We're leaving. We don't want to be here for this. We chose this because it's dark. We live on 20 acres. We will lose what we love about the neighborhood when there is a hospital within walking distance. People walk their children, their strollers. They walk, yeah, I jog, whatever, on Glendale Road, which is the main thoroughfare. It's bad enough as it is, just with the regular cars, people coming and going from a hospital. I personally think that it will impact real estate values negatively in the area, and I think that's a big concern. There has been a change in administration between last year and this year, so the new board members really appreciate the extra due diligence and the digging and the work that it takes to be aware of the issues and the externalities, really, is what we're considering here. It's this section of Newcastle, and obviously it's on the border and it's beyond our control in the municipality of Cortland. It's dead quiet at night. It's pitch black. There are no lights. All the neighbors, pretty much everyone, they're all on timers. You know, raccoon or a fox or a opossum comes out, the light goes on for 15 seconds, it goes off. And that is the nature of the West End, a hospital in the middle of a very dark part of the West End where the majority of all the residents are on their 20 acres, maybe the smallest ones are 5, some have more. They're kind of in nature out there, and a hospital plopped into the middle of that, even if it isn't in our town, is going to change forever that part of town. So the work that you're doing is really trying to assess the appropriateness. And the one thing that the town of Newcastle has not done is that it hasn't taken a formal position and communicated a formal position to the town. There have been a lot of inquiries, there's a lot of memos, there's good memos, there's good linkages, but they're unlike the town of Austining came on and said, we absolutely oppose this at the public hearing. The town of Newcastle really is silent on the point of whether they oppose or would support the application. There's been a lot of, well, tell us more, we need more. But there has not been a point of view that's been conveyed. The Millwood West End Advisory Board thought carefully. We read 600 pages of materials related to this. We came to a conclusion opposing it. We put it in a memo and we gave it to you, and it was volleyed over to them, but the town proper does not have a point of view, and we would wish that they would join us, and we would ask you for your taking a point of view.
Okay, duly noted.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
If I may, I'm not a member of the Millwood Board, but I did meet with them several months ago. I happen to be the neighbor who lives directly next to the property we're talking about. And I've been dealing with this issue since 2010. There are a number of different issues that have to be addressed, and the Cortland Town Planning Board is likely, I think, to pass a negative declaration in its April meeting. But a lot of this, I think, is really the cart before the horse. And to be very blunt, when we talk about things that make you a little weary, or someone else saying, I don't trust it unless it's in a deed, let's be blunt. The property was purchased in 2010 by an LLC that was owned by Kevin Cassidy. He has multiple felony convictions. He was serving time at that time for money laundering. He bought the Newcastle property with an LLC. Hudson Ridge is an LLC. He bought a property in Quaker Hill Drive with another LLC. When we talk about, I'm not talking about the man and his integrity. I'm talking about whether we can rely on assurances of mitigation. We get to questions of staffing, shifts, vans. These are questions that should be answered by an operator, not the owner. Under the OASIS regulations, there should have been a consultation with OASIS. They have refused for the last 12 years to tell us who is going to operate this. Their lawyer can't answer with concrete reliability that we're going to have a shift from this hour to this hour, that we're going to have so many staff, so many professionals. It has to be the operator. They say we'll have someone, but they won't identify it. And these issues are not limited to the traffic. Those who saw the last meeting, the question was asked, what about group therapy sessions? They're very common in rehab centers. They're not counted in the, quote, family visits. We don't know if an operator will say that these patients should have 2 meetings a week with family members. That would multiply their projections of traffic by 8. The wells, there was a test. We question the comparisons. They compared themselves not to a hospital, but I believe to a nursing home. The water requirements were quite different. They ran the tests for that. We said that's not enough. I know I've lost water. I've gone days without water already, and they're not operating. The lighting, they say, well, even your summary reports that they say it will not go to a neighbor's property. The fence is 6 feet high. I looked at their lighting plans. I have a deck that's on the 2nd floor. I'm going to be looking at a stadium next to me with the outside lighting for all of the buildings, lighting for the parking, a garage right across the fence from me. I agree with all of the requirements of put some restriction in a deed. But with all due respect, as a political entity or a governmental entity, I think you have more standing than I do to say, who is this guy? We want to know who's operating it. If you're going to make a representation that there will be well monitoring, what happens if it fails? If I run out of water, are they going to pay? Is Kevin Cassidy going to pay? Is it going to be bonded? Will there be an escrow? Any of the mitigating factors, I think, really have to be put in with ironclad assurances. Part of the OASIS process, there should first have been a consultation of the concept of the program. That has not been done. But the next step in an application, they look at the backgrounds of the owners, operators. You can't own more than 10% if you have a criminal background. It's not going to get through without some changes. And I provided the board with literature indicating that drug rehab centers are frequent vehicles for money laundering. Everyone's afraid to ask the question because we look at the use, not the owner. I think you have the clout and respectfully the responsibility to look at the owner and the reliability of any promises made, because half of it is in Newcastle. I'm taking more time than I wanted, but Thank you. I really appreciate
Excuse me,
your
sir.
interest.
you.
Your name?
Michael Shannon. I live
And
at
can you just, yeah,
2022
your address.
Quaker Ridge Road. When you drive from Newcastle into Cortland, the first house is, or the last house in Newcastle is the 20-acre, or 28-acre parcel, which has one home on it. Then there's, in the Cortland side, is the Hudson Wellness Center, and then there's my house. So,
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you. So Sabrina, I think you heard a lot of good points that we should try to incorporate into this letter, and more than the letter, you know, I want to make sure I'm at that next meeting, and I think we should have a representation there, so it's not just our letter, but we make sure that they're in person focusing on this.
Yeah, my office is attending the April 5th meeting,
Okay.
Lisa, and you know, I can add some of that into the letter. I'd like some direction from the town board as to, you know, which aspects you want me to incorporate. Keeping in mind that this is not, we're not permitting this. We are, is the town board objecting to this based on what you've heard tonight and what you've read in staff memo? You know, I need some direction.
I mean, I am, but I don't know about the rest of the board.
Yeah, I don't know if we were going to have an opportunity to discuss this further beyond this meeting, but I most definitely question what's, you know, based on what's been said here. I'm very concerned, so I'd like to know if we do have representation at their meeting, what will be said, you know, and of course what will be put in the letter. I think we need to regroup and come to some sort of consensus.
So you are aware, when we attend the meetings, we do not say anything. We are there to observe and to understand what decisions are being made by the town of Cortland. You know, what the applicant says, how the town of Cortland is directing the applicant, the questions they're asking. We are there to, you know, kind of observe the process. We are not speaking on behalf of the town. You know, if you are authorizing my office to speak on your behalf, I'm happy to do so. But I do so hesitantly without knowing where you all stand on this.
So, you know, we've been following this obviously for a long time. And I think it is time to take that stand and to speak on behalf of the town. And I know Kellen has been thankfully attending those meetings, which is great. I will be at the April 5th meeting as well, to advocate for our residents. Not because Kellen can't do it, just because I think
Offense taken.
it comes a
It's
little
complete
different from the
position.
supervisor. But I think we actually really need answers to all these questions, because this is very troubling, everything I'm hearing. And I don't know that they're necessarily considering all of these issues that should be, because they're impacting our residents.
Sabrina, is it typical at all for people in your position or to speak at these? Because I do support that proposition. But in your experience, is that something that's frequent?
It depends on the direction. You know, I'm happy to speak or instruct Kellen to speak on behalf of the town if we are given direction to speak. You know, we've been reviewing the application materials, looking for more information to ascertain that it does not impact Newcastle, or what the mitigation strategies are to prevent impact to the town of Newcastle. So, you know, if the town board would like us to go and carry forth a message, I'm happy to do so.
I
You know-
agree with that. I believe the rest are saying, which is letters are good, but in person is equal and sometimes even better if it's the same message and it's consistent, which I believe it would be. So I guess we can provide whatever that message is going to be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to
Yeah.
understand what the arguments are as well. I mean, what is the standing, if you will?
Yeah, I would like to work with Sabrina and come
Certainly,
back to
we
you with
should-
some
we should all talk about
recommendations
that,
in
because
terms of
if-
optimizing the message.
If you're going to
Absolutely.
appear, it's going to be a lot better if we have
Oh, no.
very valid arguments, which
Yes.
Particularly the lack of visibility on the operator, I think that
we
is
should
That's very
explore.
important.
concern.
Yeah, that's the most concerning aspect. I mean, do we have representations by someone with no expertise on running such a facility? I mean, how could that be reliable?
Yep.
So we need to obviously ascertain the facts and, you know, get some consensus among board members, which I think we already have, but,
Great.
yeah.
All right, so
Thank you all.
Dialed in, is there anyone outside commenting on this?
we're not, we invited the Millwood West End Advisory Board, so that's why we're having you speak, yeah. Okay, all right, so we'll follow up on this, and I guess you'll get us a revised draft, but we'll speak in the meantime as to, you know, a little more clarity as to what should be included.
Yeah, I'll work with council
Okay,
and make sure that your sentiments are incorporated.
perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Okay,
Sure.
wait, she's here for the next one as well. Economy of time. The next is authorization to remit payment for the East of Hudson Corporation for O&M. Sabrina, can you walk the board through this remittance that Town of Newcastle is going to be responsible for?
Sure. So just to give you guys some background, under the municipal separate storm sewer system regulations that are issued by the Department of Environmental Conservation, one of the requirements, particularly given our location in the East of Hudson watershed for New York City's drinking water supply, is to implement stormwater retrofit projects on existing properties today and capture some phosphorus reduction. In all of the municipalities in the East of Hudson watershed joined together back, I forget what I said, it was 2015 maybe, and we formed the East of Hudson Watershed Corporation. That corporation has been spearheading our obligations under the MS4 permit to implement stormwater retrofit projects. The town itself had a 25.1 kilogram per year requirement of phosphorus reduction. We have gone through 2 5-year cycles. We are in the second 5-year cycle. So we are required to remove approximately 50.2 kilograms of phosphorus per year from our community from a retrofit project. Understanding that it is very difficult, particularly given the cost of land and the type of development, the single family residential development that dominates our community, in the watershed, it is extremely difficult to locate projects in Newcastle due to the cost per kilogram of phosphorus that would be required to be removed. As part of umbrella compliance, we are complying with our reduction requirement because we are taking advantage as a whole watershed of all the projects that are located in whichever municipality. As long as it is within the watershed, we get credit for it. Part of that credit involves operation or O&M of those retrofit projects. Where a municipality has a project in their community and they are maintaining it with their Department of Public Works or Highway office, they can obtain credits for their obligation under the operation and maintenance for the maintenance. Because we do not have any projects yet, we are responsible for the payment of our O&M share. And it's allocated based on our initial phosphorus reduction requirement as promulgated by DEC. So the bill you have before you is a bill that we receive yearly to maintain all of the retrofit projects that have been installed in the New York City watershed, in the East of Hudson watershed, that are being managed by the East of Hudson Watershed Corporation.
So when we get a project, which we're hoping should be by the end of the year, there's one that we're working on right now, we will have credits against this payment and hopefully will wash the payment, and so there won't be any out-of-pocket expense for us.
I don't want to mislead you. I don't know that it will wash the payment. That payment changes every year depending on how many additional projects come online in the year. We have a target It was 560 kilograms per year. I believe it is closer to 600 kilograms now. That is promulgated by DEC as a watershed for us to meet. So the more projects that get implemented, the more operation and maintenance needs to be paid for by all of the participants in the East of Hudson Watershed Corporation. While it will not pay for the entire O&M charge, it will counterbalance some of that money owed to the corporation.
Wishful thinking, sorry.
All right, any questions?
Any questions for Sabrina? Okay. Okay, Sabrina, thanks so
Thank you,
much.
Sabrina.
Thanks, Sabrina.
Have a good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Ed, you want to walk us through the next topic?
Sure. So the next topic on the work session agenda is the consideration of an adoption of a development moratorium for the we're calling the North Greeley Corridor. Last week, the town board had a joint work session with the planning board, and you'll recall that there was a lengthy and I think very insightful discussion by both boards and to the next steps that the town board ought to consider with respect to rezoning this particular area of the downtown. And really, my takeaway was, in terms of zoning, that there are really only three variables. It's the height of permitted structures in that area. It's going to be the commercial requirement on the first floor and where that's applied, and then the scope or the area that's actually going to be rezoned. But I think the board now has a path laid out in front of it with respect to next steps to achieve rezoning in that area. So at the suggestion of Supervisor Katz, I've prepared a moratorium that would bring back the limited moratorium that had been in place up until the end of last year, again, just with respect to the North Greeley corridor and just with respect to the projects over a certain size. And it's 3,000 square feet is the size that was in the old moratorium and would be in this new proposed moratorium. The draft starts on page 19 of the packet, and the first section really lays out the policy objectives of the moratorium and of the rezoning generally. So happy to talk about any edits or comments and incorporate them with respect to that section the board may have. But the other sections of the moratorium, section 3 gives you the 6-month period. It gives you the 3,000 square foot threshold in section 3, paragraph 2. As with all moratoriums, let me say it's a 6-month period, all right, and that's in paragraph 3. And then we have the provision for applying for exemption. So if a property owner who was otherwise subject to the moratorium was going to incur substantial hardship, they'd have the opportunity to come before you and request an exemption. Notwithstanding that the prior moratorium had been in place for an extended period of time, the town did not receive any exemption requests, as far as I know, from any property owner who had been subject to the prior moratorium. That's essentially it. So I'll stop talking and ask the board if there are any edits or comments.
Just one question. So that notice to applicants in section 4, that's effectively saying that if someone were granted an exemption, but the board adopted a zoning change, that obviously that would supersede that exemption.
Right, you always are, until a project reaches a point where the property owner has what's called vested rights, you're always subject to zoning changes. So this is just reaffirming that's the case.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So, I don't know what's changed. In fact, I don't think anything's changed over the past months or years, for that matter. Other than the fact that the dollar store, which could have been a tenant, is not a tenant and was successfully prevented, if that's the right term, from being a tenant, in large part due to the moratorium. There's no applications that I'm aware of that are consistent with and by right being sought in the hamlet, meaning 3 stories and wherever the zoning is now. So there's nothing that is on the horizon immediately that we're saying we need to stop this from happening because it's not fitting with our community. So what really strikes me as unfortunate, or I really want to know what changed with the majority, is, there was, over the course of the past year, something that was submitted to the Examiner News by all of you, the form-based code in Newcastle. Setting aside that, there's a better way to move forward. And what was said by all of you, or I don't know if Chris was actually there at the time, the 4 successive moratoriums on downtown development have effectively made it impossible to develop buildings like the former Rite Aid site. This is now on social media. Tara, you were sharing one of the posts from Unite Newcastle, and in pertinent part, you said that we were
Jeremy,
beginning-
instead of
hold on.
rehashing
No,
this, can
I-
you
no,
just,
I'd
if
like
you have any substantive
Yes,
comments,
this
could
is.
you make those, please?
I'm going to continue.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
we'll begin the process this summer, ready to hit the ground running when the moratorium on development is lifted. 5 fast facts from Unite Newcastle from June. We've had a moratorium on development for the last few years, preventing any organic development from taking place. I don't have to go into to many of the supporters, what some people have said, but real concern that over the past 2 years, this is back from 2020, the moratorium is contributing to the decline in vitality in our hamlet by keeping buildings like Rite Aid empty and not allowing for the development of new buildings or feet on the street. Again, I won't go through the rest of them, but what I oppose and why I have an issue with this is there's a lot of work to be done, and I have no doubt that it's going to be done, and you're going all to do it, and we as a board will do it. But we're hearing things from 10% affordable, which we all support. I don't know anyone who doesn't support that. But both the town planner and the planning board, while they support it in concept, have concerns about what it'll actually do in terms of practical work. And I just think a lot of these things have to happen in conjunction with an actual policy or plan. We heard about whether it was intentional or not. There's people who unquestionably, I was reviewing the minutes from our various form-based code meetings and other meetings and social media about what people were saying about 4 stories. I certainly have no issue with 4 stories, but I think we have to just be honest with the community and say there is a real chance to make this happen if we're going to keep the commercial or retail that was preached to maintain over the past year, that we're going to have 4 stories to make that a reality. And I think we need to just get out in front of it and just say it, as I said last week. There's a lot of concerns that I have, and I just don't want to do it piecemeal, and I don't understand what has changed, and I'd like to hear from the town board what has changed, why the moratorium that scared many people and said this was holding us back, and that you as a collective unit wrote to the Examiner News, made statements about what has changed. And I think one thing that actually has changed, interestingly enough, I just saw the school enrollment for next year is expected to be down 65 students, despite the blowing up from COVID that we were heard was going to happen. And again, this is only CCSD, I haven't seen Bedford, but by 26, 27 down 92 students. So we're almost in an alternative universe. What was said only months ago has changed, and I don't understand. Well, those are numbers, but I understand why is this town board, majority, now changing its position? What has changed? Help me understand why we need a moratorium.
Okay. As we are reconsidering zoning, this is something I believe that is appropriate. And And that's why we're proposing it for 6 months on a limited basis. It is not the entire 72-acre hamlet on which we are imposing a moratorium. That's not what's proposed here. I certainly take your comments, and if anyone else has any
To be
comments.
clear, Ed, this is the same moratorium. It's a certain size. The size is the issue, not where it covers. It's the size of property. So, we're not talking anything different. So if that's the answer, it is what it is, but I just still don't understand why what we have seen. We've always been looking to rezone. This is not new.
So Jeremy, thank you for revisiting some of the comments made during the election. I think what's important to note is that we saw, robust public engagement as the, part of the critical path to successful development. And as you know, there's been much discussion in terms of how we can proceed on that front, but I think that is a key aspect of our approach to ensuring that North Greeley is developed in a way that, represents the views of the town and the public at large, so.
Lisa, when the previous town board voted on the moratorium, was that a unanimous vote? Did everyone agree?
I believe it
on-
was.
on the moratorium?
That was when we first started looking
So
at
there
the
was no
form-based
disagreement
code.
as to,
No,
by anyone? Okay.
no.
I do have an edit. I mean, if we're done with this part of the discussion, I just have an edit on paragraph 3 of the first of section 2, legislative intent and purpose. So paragraph 3 is giving a bit of a history of what happened with the form-based code, and the last sentence being that the town board announced that based upon community input, it planned to limit the application of the form-based code to a portion of North Greeley Avenue in the Chappaqua Hamlet. So that's sort of giving a little bit of the history, but I would say that that's a bit of an incomplete picture of the culmination of that. I would add, whatever language is appropriate. However, the town board opted to continue the SECRA process, allowing such application to the entire 72-acre Chappaqua Hamlet. That would be accurate, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think that was as significant, if not more significant, than the plan to limit the application.
Right. And you may want to say it planned to initially limit the application.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't know whether that's there just to define North Greeley corridor or not.
Yeah.
That history is sort of, but certainly if it's going to be there, I think Vicky's comment is correct.
Okay.
Do we even need that?
I think it's there to
I
define
was
North
just
Greeley corridor.
walking
But
us
if we're going
toward,
to have it there, then I think it should be an
Yeah.
accurate depiction of
Yeah, I
the
mean, you could just
continued-
define North Greeley corridor without the history.
Yeah, correct.
what would be the preference then? Just,
I would say
just
just
define
define
it.
North Greeley
define it.
corridor, yeah.
Okay.
Because I read that as saying that's the,
I don't know that we actually need any of this. It's a new moratorium. I don't know that we need any of this.
I do want the
I
record to
mean,
be
we
clear,
need some
though,
of a record,
that
but
there's momentum here that the board wants to capture. This is not, because the prior moratorium had been in place for an extended period of time. And the record should be clear, particularly after last week's joint meeting with the planning board, that there's, the town board's taking concrete steps at this point to get this done. Not through a form-based code, but through alternate legislation that will implement rezoning. So that's the reason, part of the reason why I wanted to walk the reader through how we got here.
And perhaps it is best to leave it in, because we do want to show for the record that we have a reason, and that there's been a sort of historical reason to continue this
yeah, no, I'm
moratorium.
with you.
So
I'm saying.
I don't object
think
to this
putting that in.
historical part being there. I just wanted to complete the full story. Yeah.
So I just have one quick thing to say. So from my perspective, Jeremy, I, again, said this multiple times, I think it's completely unproductive and a waste of everyone's time to pick and choose quotes during a long campaign season. But to the extent that you're asking what's changed, at least from my perspective, I can't speak for the other members of Unite Newcastle, both sitting here and who were involved before. Many of the arguments for why we needed a form-based code essentially amounted to some version of the town is dying or the town will die. We heard that repeatedly. So I have better things to do with my time than to go back and find quotes. But if you want, we can certainly do that. But many people said that. It was sort of a routine comment. And to the extent that a moratorium put a lid on any potential development, that was one argument, right? That this was something that was imposed to pursue a form-based code, and to then turn around and say there is no development in all these vacant lots and so forth. So to me, that's one, and that's certainly what I understood for a long part of the debate. What we're talking about now is a very specific part of town that I think there's, if not unanimous, certainly in every conversation I had last year with every resident, that is a focal point. And so to the extent that we, in collaboration with the planning board, which I think is the proper way to do this, and we started that last week, and hopefully that'll be a continuing thing, to the extent that we can come up with options for North Greeley, I think it makes perfect sense. So I think there's complete justification for a moratorium now. I think last year, the argument was it was sort of being used, both ways. And so to me, that's what's changed. So that's the only thing I wanted to say on that.
I'd like to respond to that, and I appreciate your efforts to deflect saying something at one time and not sticking to it and changing it, not just 60 degrees, but 180 degrees. And it is productive because you have to mean what you say and say what you mean. And sometimes you could say you were wrong. I said, listen, if the form-based code isn't right, then I'm wrong and I'm happy to be wrong. It's someone else's fault, or you're misconstruing, or you're simply not being fair, you're not being productive. I had more than 20 times said, for example, charrettes for public property, not private property. The response was for everything. Now we're back at charrettes for public property. And I would point out that we actually had worked with the planning board. The planning board was involved from the beginning. They were on the downtown working committee, and Tom Curley at one point presented a potential plan for downtown. Not necessarily we had to follow that, but his ideas. So I realized that you got involved, in the election process, but there was a lot going on. And to say that it's not productive, I think it is productive because we have to answer to our actions. I'm certainly imperfect. I've certainly said things that change. But there's so many 180s here, and I appreciate your response, but I still don't understand how there's a difference. This moratorium has been going on for a long time, but it is what it is, and it is what it is.
So
Okay,
I would
thank
like
you,
to-
Jeremy. Let's just agree to disagree and
move on.
move on from this because
I
we
know
are very
everybody who
behind.
said something, I would just like to say something.
Okay.
I know you don't want more talk on this. I just want to say that, Jeremy, I know that you worked very hard on this form-based code proposal, and you must have been really disappointed with what happened with the election, but I just want to say that I really hope we can work together in a really collaborative and congenial fashion to do what's best for the town. I think we all want the same thing. We disagreed on how to implement the goals, but we really had a lot of alignment with the goals that you had. So, while we can go back and rehash what people said at different points and out of context, I think that that's not really productive. That's not really helping the town move forward. So I just want to
Okay,
tell
we're
you
going to
that
end this discussion now.
I want to work together with all of us, all 5 of us, including you, as a team, to do what's right for the town.
I appreciate some of the condescending
that's
tone,
really
but we,
Okay.
we will work together.
Thank you very
we will
much.
absolutely work together, but thank you very much.
All right, let's move on now. Thank you.
Anything else on this?
So Ed, I'd like you to make those suggested changes. I think we would all agree that those are correct to make. And I think the next step is what, to move this to declare a public hearing on this?
So
We
in
need
Friday's
that?
packet, I'd have a red line of the proposed local law with a resolution referring it out to the county planning board and the Newcastle planning board for reports and recommendation.
Perfect. And then we also need to set a public hearing as well?
You would do that in the we typically do that in the resolution,
Okay.
so that would be for next week.
Perfect. All right.
Second to write that down.
All right, and moving on to the exciting world of culvert replacements.
You have no idea. So, what we have here is a proposal from Tectonic for engineering design services. The board will remember that when Hurricane Ida came through, not only did it take out the pedestrian bridge along 120 in town, but it also did some damage to Byram Lake Road. There are culverts that run under the road, and the waters came through with such force that it actually it overwhelmed the culverts and overran the road. We know that there is some damage there. Tectonic has given us, it's taken them that long to come back to us with a proposal for this analysis. And their design services will form the basis of our second FEMA application for funding to take and replace the culvert. So this is, it's a $40,000 expenditure. It's a sizable sum. However, it's the engineering services and proposal that we will need in order to be able to apply for FEMA, hopefully for significantly more money than the $40,000 to take and replace this culvert. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay.
Thank you.
There are a couple of administrative items I'll just go through really quickly. One is authorization to attend a conference. This is Bart Carey going to the American Waterworks conference. He's going to be using a town car and reimbursement of not to exceed $850. There's authorization to enter into an agreement with Willowbrook Swim Club. It's an 80-20 split for swim lessons over the summer. Next is to create a capital project. This is the rehabilitation of Amsterdam Field number 1. This is the $100,000 SAM grant that we're receiving to rehabilitate that field. And the next one is a new item. It's authorization to purchase a T2 Loop 2 pay station, which is the parking machines at the train station. Christina, can you speak on this a little bit?
So we've been nursing our current meter boards for some time. They're really obsolete. They haven't been supported, but we've been kind of patching them together and working with them to try to avoid having to purchase new. Time has come where they really cannot. They're not supported. We can't make them work the way they're supposed to work. It takes a long time for each transaction, and we've gotten a lot of feedback that people are having difficulty using them. So this is we're asking for authorization for purchase of the new machine. It's basically the same machine, but it's updated. It is we're buying it off a contract, so it's a set pricing. And I've spoken to my contemporaries in the other communities in Westchester. They're happy with this machine and the service for the provider that we would be purchasing it from. And we're looking to do that as soon as possible. There is a lead time to get it. So that's why it was kind of put on tonight's agenda. We apologize for that, but we think it would be good for the residents if every day that we can get it, every day sooner we can get it in service. Thank you.
A single machine runs about $12,000. We should be able to pay for it out of operating. There are 2 machines there right now. We have found that the location of one that's closest to the tracks has been adversely affected by the train vibration over the years. So we're actually going to place the new one closest to the parking lot and sort of keep it away from that trouble spot. But most people do use pay by phone, so the actual percentage of commuters going into the city that are using the machines has been steadily decreasing over the years. So we think one will work well.
Great.
Anyway, thanks. Ed's got
Okay.
one more topic.
Jill,
there.
real quickly on Amsterdam Field, when do we think that's actually going to happen?
We actually April.
15th on or about, he's supposed to start on or about April 15th, I think.
To sod the field, so it should be ready for the fall.
Great. Okay, thanks.
You had something else?
There's a late edition resolution on Chappaqua Crossing. This came out of discussions that came to us last week involving the timing for the completion of the road improvements down at the Sawmill River Parkway. Toll Brothers is purchasing the residential subdivision portion of the property, what we call the East Village. You may remember back in January, the board adopted a resolution to accommodate that transaction by allowing toll recourse to the cash bond that Summit had posted for the purpose of ensuring that those road improvements actually get built. Toll's come back and asked for further accommodation that would give it a little bit more time in the unlikely event that Summit did not or could not complete the roadway improvements, and Toll had to step into their shoes and complete the improvements. They are looking for a little bit more time beyond the current August 31st, 2022 deadline that Summit is currently operating under to do that. And Summit, in turn, would like a little bit of comfort that if it gets out to August 31st of this year, and for some unforeseen reason, and we've had plenty of those over the last couple of years, it was not able to complete the road improvements, that it could come back to the town board and make a case for an extension, which it has done a number of times already, just given the delays that they experience with trying to work through different issues with DOT. So we've put together a resolution. It was only finalized today. That's why it wasn't in the packet on Friday. But I put copies in front of the board, and Toll and Summit are looking and hoping that the board can entertain it tonight.
Okay.
Thank you for your quick work on this. All right, any questions? All right. Anything else?
No, we're ready to move into our town board meeting.
Okay, so let's,
you.
can I have a motion to adjourn the work session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm making a decision that we need a 5-minute bathroom break before we start the town board meeting.
Excellent.
All right. Good evening, welcome back, and welcome to the town board meeting of Tuesday, March 8th, 2022. We are running a little late, so we thank you all for your patience, as usual. So before we begin, I'm not going to read a supervisor's report, but I have a few things. First, today is International Women's Day, so I want to say thank you on behalf of the board to all the wonderful women today and throughout history, yay, who have made invaluable contributions to the world. And as we celebrate these achievements, let's also continue to fight for equality and women's rights every day.
Here, here.
Thank you. So happy International Women's Day. We also have a statement that we would like to read about Ukraine. So I'd like to read that on behalf of the board. Ukraine gained its independence from the former Soviet Union in 1991 and thereafter formed a tripartite system of government and enacted a new constitution. On February 24th, 2022, Russia lost an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, which has triggered international outcry and condemnation that the town of Newcastle wholeheartedly supports and joins. Newcastle is home to individuals of Ukrainian descent, some of whom have family in Ukraine fearing for their lives. The supervisor and the town board of the town of Newcastle would like to express that the people of Ukraine have the unwavering support of the people of Newcastle, New York. The town of Newcastle stands in solidarity with our Ukrainian neighbors and sends thoughts and prayers for peace in Ukraine. We encourage all residents of Newcastle to find ways to show support to our Ukrainian friends and neighbors, both in Ukraine and here in Newcastle. Thank you. We also will be hanging the Ukrainian flag in support of Ukraine and in the hope for peace. All right, so now we are moving to our Community Corner segment, which is my favorite segment of the meeting. So I'd like to announce on a bit of a happier note that there's something in the water at Horace Greeley High School, because following the strokes of the girls' team, the boys' varsity swim team also has just won the state championship. Congratulations to the boys' swim team, and we will be having a commemoration ceremony for them in the near future. We also have a lot of new teenagers in town, and we want to wish a happy 13th birthday to Luke Caplow. He will turn 13 tomorrow, March 9th. And also a happy 13th birthday to Miles Brensilver, who will turn 13 on March 11th. So happy birthday to both of you, and look for your names on the sign in front of Bill. As always, if anyone in the audience has anything you would like to announce in Community Corner, feel free to send an email to communitycorner@mynewcastle.org, and we announce that at our public meetings. Okay, so now we'll move to the town administrator's report.
I'm actually going to yield my time to our representatives from the Westchester EMS, who have been kind enough to come and join us tonight. We've got Al Kim and Don Cottle here with us this evening.
Okay.
Welcome.
Should you yield your time?
I'm going to yield my time.
Okay, I feel very honored. I thank you for having myself and Don. I brought Don along in case you ask any hard questions. Congratulations to the new town board members and Lisa for your supervisor.
Thank you.
I asked Jill if we could possibly meet you guys because I don't think many people know exactly the makeup of what EMS really is. And, you know, in your town, you have Chappaqua VAC, right? We all know them. They're in the ambulances. But when we call 911, myself included, if I wasn't in the business, I mean, you just know lights show up and people are walking around your home and, you know, you get to the hospital. But with the recent advent of, you know, the last couple of years with COVID, it's been challenged, you know, and everything's been pushed to its limits and capacity. And I thought it might be a great idea to sort of maybe give you guys an introduction to what WEMS is, or Westchester EMS, and how they work with Chappaqua VAC, which comprises of EMS. So just kind of a summary, we printed a sheet, we gave you guys a little history. It's there. A little sort of Newcastle-centric data it goes along with it. What's unique with WEMS is in the days of everyone sort of having their own services, WEMS was started as a shared service among 8 different towns from the very outset for the fly cars anyway. And interestingly enough, really a resident of Newcastle was instrumental in forming it, which is kind of a good trivia for Newcastleites. The idea was to take the surrounding communities, there are 8 of them, to put together a advanced life support paramedic service that they would share the cost and the benefits of. And then they work with 10 different volunteer agencies to transport the patients if you need to be transported. The paramedics obviously are not volunteers, they're paid. The funding model itself is a shared model, and it's unique enough that other communities outside of our area are now examining it because there's such shortage of staff and resources. So it's a real scarce resource, one that's becoming scarcer. So the idea was, hey, let's share it. Let's create consortiums, districts, that kind of model. And this one is being touted as something to look at. So I figured, you know what? In case you had questions, we thought maybe we would just meet with Jill and Lisa to say, you have any questions? But Jill thought we should come in and meet everybody. So here we are. That's really it. Okay, if you have any questions. Sure.
So we're serviced on the west end by, we're serviced on the west end by CVAC.
Yep.
Sorry, not CVAC, I apologize. By
OVAC.
OVAC.
Austin. Yeah,
Yep.
Austin. So are these numbers still included even though it's coming out of?
No, so these are numbers that we respond to. So the numbers that you have in front of you is just the numbers that WEMS paramedics responded to.
Okay.
There's a carve-out included in the assessment as well for coverage, for funding. So we carve out that portion. Yeah. That doesn't mean we don't go in. I mean, there's no offense. So,
Right.
yeah. So, we go in when we're called. But these are the calls that we managed.
Right, so the overwhelming majority of Newcastle is covered by WEMS.
Yes.
The-
90, or a little over 90%. Yeah.
So we happen to have Millwood West End Advisory Board here, and that area is actually covered by OVAC, which is now Mid-Hudson.
Right.
And Phelps is their core, their anchor hospital, I guess is a better way to put it, where Northern Westchester is
WEMS.
WEMS is.
Well, it's not an anchor. It's in hospital jargon.
Okay.
It's catchment. So So depending on where you live, hospitals have their sort of catchment area, and so if you happen to reside in that part of Newcastle, obviously as well as some of the river towns, the hospital catchment area would fall in that area, versus other parts would naturally just be northern Westchesters. But they're part of Northwell. It's not like, again, there's no wall. Yeah.
And that was done just in terms of response time. Think about where CVAC is in town, and think about where Nicole lives on the far end of town versus an ambulance coming out of Austining, and how much quicker response time would be for the west end of town, which is why there was the division.
And since paramedics are not in ambulances, they ride by themselves, and they're in the SUVs. You probably see them kind of making a lot of noise. Sorry about that. Around the communities, but they rely on the volunteers to get there. Oftentimes to cancel them, if they could, because it turns out about 50% of the 911 calls, you don't necessarily need the paramedic level of care, but you definitely need an ambulance, let's say. So it's great when these people aren't paid. It's incredible. They're our neighbors. They go out, they come to our homes, they give you an assessment. Hopefully they get there simultaneously or sometimes before the paramedics, because they're supposed to be right in your community. And, if they don't need the medics, they'll cancel us.
How many total paramedics do you have?
Well, for this portion of the consortium, which are the 8 towns, including Newcastle, we run 3 units 24/7. And then we have Mount Pleasant as well. And there's another 2 that covers, Hawthorne, Sleepy Hollow, Pleasantville, Valhalla.
Got it.
Was this always your model? You've been around since 2000.
2000, yeah.
Right, because I recall in a past life of mine when I was PTA president,
Okay,
we devoted an entire meeting to your service and how it coordinated with CVAC and, other first responders.
yeah.
And it was a long time ago, but I thought that was it was a good vehicle by which to reach the community to explain to them what you did. So
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
you might reach out to them again if you want.
Sure.
If you want another bigger audience. But I was just wondering because I
We're a
don't.
pretty big audience.
I remember the room was really full. It's not that you're not big, but it's a different. It's
Yeah,
a different.
sure.
It is a different audience because you have a lot of parents that tune in. So there are overlaps. Not to say that Newcastle is not a big audience too, but I was just wondering because I don't recall these particular towns being part of the group.
Yeah.
Is that
They were.
they were okay?
Yeah.
So
The original.
There are eight
were the
towns
original ones?
formed the original consortium, for the paramedics.
okay,
Yeah.
because I don't remember it being that big. I was curious if you
Yeah.
had added some more. I think it's a great model.
Yeah, it's a nice balance, and the model in which call volume, population, square miles, and assessed value, makes up the vehicle for funding is very, very good too. So it's a nice setup.
I just want to say I've had personal experience with Westchester EMS. When we first moved to town, we had a young child in my household that had an allergic reaction, and CVAC was great, but Westchester EMS arrived first, and being a mother with a child, having a really frightening incident take place. Incredible, service to the community, and they ended up riding in the ambulance with us, and really just
The
brought a
paramedics are
tremendous
great.
level of
They
confidence.
really are the heroes. I ride a desk. They're out there, doing their work. So thank you. I love hearing
Really
that.
impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Is there anything we can do to help kind of support you and the work that you do?
Oh, yeah, actually, and us and Chappaqua VAC, to be honest, is getting the word out, the need for volunteers, for the volunteer agencies. They need a lot more volunteers. People who are interested in becoming EMTs, it'd be great. We do have EMTs as well, although they're not in the paramedic cars. They're paramedics only. So, but we could use EMTs as well for our ambulance division. I mean, it's across the nation. There's a huge staffing shortage. It's really big to a point that County Executive Latimer has taken it on to consider it a crisis. And there's a big movement for getting EMS recognized by the state as an essential service, which today it's not. So when you hear Shelley Mayer talking about that, if you could lend voice and support, it'd be terrific.
Okay.
Will do.
Thank you for
That,
Just writing
okay,
that down.
thank you.
So much.
Thank you for having us.
Great
very
job.
much.
Thank you
coming.
both
Appreciate it.
so much. Thank you really for coming and for all that
Yeah,
you
both of
do.
you. And we didn't call on you, so.
Thank you, guys. We so appreciate you coming.
Oh, anytime, Jill. See you on you coming?
Yes, of course. We'll be there. Tiffany, we got a break? We're going?
I think Tiffany's frozen.
Oh.
Or she just mesmerized.
No,
Oh, no, she's not.
She's there.
I think she's
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
I didn't hear you.
Actually, so Tiffany's been going to the OVAC meetings for me. And when Lauren was my assistant, she joined me at the WEMS meetings, but Tiffany will join me with those as well. It's it's a terrific model. It's worked really well for us. And we're going to be having CVAC come in and speak to the board as well.
Great.
Because it dawned on us that with all the change in, new residents moving in from the city especially, they call 911, people come, but they have no idea that most of the time, the person that shows up is a volunteer, and it's a completely different model than when you were living in the city coming up here, and how it relies upon neighbors helping neighbors. And we thought it would be a really nice way to take and just introduce our volunteer model to our new residents.
Great.
It's great.
Great idea.
We're going to have these community segments and bring in the fire department as well, and
Yep.
so, yeah.
Thanks for bringing that in, Jill.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Okay.
All right, so next we are going to move to any public comment, new business. If anyone in the audience would like to come on up, if you can just, when you come up, say your name and your address.
Let me take this off, right?
You can.
About 6 feet. Okay. I'm Sid Feinhersh. I'm at 19 Carriage Hill in the West End area I sometimes call the Lower West End. And I would like to thank the board for approving my membership on the West End, the Millwood West End Advisory Board. Though I do have to say, I'm not here to speak for the board. I'm only here to speak for me as of tonight, okay? So my comments have to do with affordable housing, which I know is on the agenda. And I will say that I am in support of that, though I will have some more comments to make about that proposal, okay? As I understand it, when I made my presentation, yes?
Sid, I just want to interrupt for 1 second, because we are going to have a public hearing tonight on the affordable housing law.
I know.
So just if these comments are germane to that discussion, we want to make sure we incorporate them into that as well.
Okay. I don't know if you would mind if I made my statement now and maybe you can incorporate it. Is that possible?
Can we do, no? No, it's not part of the,
Okay.
that's next, though.
That's next. So should I just stand here?
Well, why don't you sit in the first row, and I will call on you first.
First chair.
Unless you have anything else you wanted to
No,
just
no,
discuss.
that's my only.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be included, so that's why. All right, does anyone else have any other public comment not related to the public hearings we're going to have this evening? Okay, perfect. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, I almost feel embarrassed that you guys recognize me before I even say hello. Hello. 100 Glendale. So I would like to talk about your interest in this Hudson Ridge Rehab Center that was talked about earlier. Is that okay?
Yes.
Great. I want to start by thanking you for having time on your schedule, not once but twice, to hear Sabrina's updates on what is going on in our neighboring municipality. And I'd like to add my thoughts. I was actually quite surprised in her most recent update to see my name. So I thought I should chime in also. I first am curious to find out if her first memo from October 7th was converted into a formal communication with Cortland Town Board, Cortland Planning Board. So I don't know if that communication happened or if it was just an update from the planning department to the town board back in October. Her memo was October 7th, 2021. Do any of you know if it was actually turned into a letter that the Cortland Planning Board received from Newcastle?
I don't know if it was turned into a letter. I do know that she spoke earlier and mentioned the fact that she had had conversations with both the Cortland Town Planner, Chris Kehoe, and that there were written communications with him as well. So
Okay.
that would be an appropriate line of communication from planner to planner. So that wouldn't surprise me.
Right. So then I want to thank the current town board for your interest and willingness to actually possibly show up to the next meeting. My concern is that it might be too late because of the way in which the planning board has structured their review. In their mind, there's no more public comment available for their secret review on the project. And they've split the project now into two pieces. And they will vote on a neg deck at their next meeting. So I don't know that that's the time to tell them how you feel. It might be, they might not even have public opportunity, but to send a letter at this time and be available to discuss with them from the town board level would be amazing. And I did watch the town of Ossining supervisor and the lieutenant supervisor of the town of Ossining, say what they had to say for the January 26th meeting. And there was a very stern letter that the Village of Ossining mayor also wrote and put into the record before the deadline. I'm sure that they would be very interested in what you had to say, regardless of, the public comments and deadlines. So thank you if you would consider, sending the letter ahead of time, because I don't know if there's any more time to comment at their next meeting. Now I wanted to talk about the notions of what constitutes declaring a neg deck versus a pause deck. It only takes concern for one environmental issue to go with a pause deck. And yet the planning board of Cortland has asked the planning department and their attorneys to write up a neg deck that they will consider and vote on at their next meeting when this is on their agenda. Now, they worded it in a way where they might vote it down, but it seems to me there's ample argument to say there's more than one concern for an environmental issue, and it only takes one. And I'd like to discuss some of the issues. It's not about using Indian Brook Reservoir water, because this project is on a well, so they won't use that water. In the most recent memo, I think Sabrina puts out that community members mentioned concern about the Indian Brook watershed capacity for development. This wouldn't be about that, because they're not going to use the water. They have the ability to corrupt the water. And in Sabrina's letter, she states clearly, or memo, that their property steeply declines towards the town of Newcastle. And if you follow the topo, it steeply declines and continues through Newcastle. And there's, ample stream and watershed, all of which winds up in the Indian Brook Reservoir. So right there, I'm thrilled that your planner and the planners of all the local communities are working on an update for the Croton Gorge Watershed Conservation Action Plan and Indian Brook Watershed Conservation Action Plan. That's happening right now. Right there should be a major study before they're approved. Moving along, yes, traffic is a problem, and I live on Glendale, so I am concerned along with the other folks on Glendale, but it's a piece of the environmental problem. It's not only the traffic, it's all of the environmental issues, the carbon emissions, the noise, et cetera, from the traffic. But it's what other ways could they wind up having adverse effect on this very sensitive biodiversity corridor, which again, Sabrina mentions in her memo. And by the way, you should know that T-Town actually wrote a letter of concern and submitted it into the record so T-Town Reservation Center submitted into the record for the planning department, just as another group of concerned people who actually pay attention to the local environment. It's the cumulative environmental impacts that we worry about. It's It's the fact, as Sabrina mentioned in her first memo and reiterated in her second memo, we have in Ossining at the top of Hawks a new condo that's going up that might have turned into a rental. I'm not sure if it's still a condo, but that's 50 some odd units. And there's the Sunshine Home that's now up and running. And now they're proposing this in what is a special part of Westchester where 4 or 5 different municipalities converge. There has to be environmental concern for this area. I should also note that they're busy pushing the fact that they suddenly reduced their bed count from, 90 something to somewhere around 50 plus or minus, it depends. And therefore they want to pass. In my book, the fact that you reduce it to 50 does not mean exactly half the environmental impacts. And nobody's going to study that. They closed the public hearing. They closed the request after they got this information at the last meeting to ask the developer, okay, you're going to divide it by half, do all your studies over again so that we're clear about what the new impacts might be. That didn't happen. In their last site plan, they added a pool and a tennis court. All of this is impermeable, surface, which would add more runoff towards Newcastle, towards the watershed. That was not looked at. Moving along, the issue that was brought up about Oasis from a gentleman who came to speak in person. So Oasis is the governing body for essentially like DOH, but for the substance abuse category of healthcare facilities. Legislator Vidat Gashi back in July 22, understanding that you typically in this category of commercial development, go first to Oasis to get a nod that they like your project, they see how it would work, they like the players, the composition, the programming, the location. Once you get the nod, you go apparently to the county commissioner, which is Michael Orth. So Mr. Gashi, Legislator Gashi, wrote to Commissioner Orth in July of 22 and again in July of 21 and January of 22, twice on behalf of the community to say, I'm interested to find out if this developer has presented him, herself to your governing body for the review of the programming. And the answer was no, both times. They've had 6-7 years to identify themselves, to explain their programming, to get a nod from the state and the county. And they have avoided it, saying it's something like the cart before the horse. Even though when you look at the regulations from Oasis, it's very clear you go to them first to discuss the concept of opening an addiction treatment center for anywhere in New York State. This has not happened. I'm happy to supply copies of those letters to you. Then, in terms of the notion of a deed restriction, I'm unclear as to what kind of restrictions Newcastle would ask Cortland to consider, but I have a few that I would just like to put out in no particular order. Number one, everything that they have proposed, they suggest they are a 48-acre site, but they are not in Cortland, a 48-acre site. They are a 20-acre site. They are not coming up in front of you for any official review. So the request in my book should be, this project should be an absolute standalone on the 20 acres from which they will be operating their property, because Newcastle is asking for deed restrictions. What kinds? Well, the notion of deed restriction means that they're not going to develop basically anything that has to do with the hospital, but people think about buildings. I would suggest, what happens if their wells, which they're having trouble with, don't sustain them, no matter what number they claim they're putting in this year or next year or whenever? Would they just ask, oh, we just want to drill a few wells on our Newcastle property? We've got an extra 28 acres. Well, the village of Ossining and the town of Ossining elected leaders made it clear in their letters that
70% of their property is within the Indian Brook watershed. So I would say, no, not allowed to drill wells. I would spell it out. What happens if their septic fields, for some reason, are no longer perking properly and they need new septic fields, and they come to Newcastle and say, we just want septic fields. We're not building anything. I would say no, because they are so close to this important watershed. What if for some reason they decide, listen, these two properties are not really related to each other because we promised as long as we're operating the hospital, we're not going to build on the second property. Do they have the right to sell the 28 acres in Newcastle to a developer who could then come to you and, let's say, request an appropriate subdivision while the hospital is running next door? Can they release that property back into the Newcastle world of opportunities, land use opportunities? I would say no, they can't. What happens if they they just want to create a couple of paths, gardens, etc., no housing? Well, what does that mean in a biodiversity corridor? Are they going to be cutting down trees? Are they going to be creating impermeable paths? Will they need irrigation? Will they be planting non-indigenous plantings in this very important sensitive area, as noted by Sabrina? I think that needs to be in there too. No pathways with plantings and so forth as part of your property use. Sorry, I'm going to go through it because I think these are important things to consider. It's not just as simple as telling them deed restriction and having them. You've heard that people have concerns about who in fact is part of this project. And if you don't state it, there's a way around it.
Cynthia,
Are they going to?
Cynthia,
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but do you have all of this written down? I feel like you're reading, right?
Scribbled.
Can you?
But even think about how many people would want them to fence their whole property. Well, if they fence 48 acres, and so the Newcastle acreage is part of a biodiversity corridor for, wild animals, habitat, etc. What is happening here?
Cynthia,
There's so
can you
many
make sure
issues.
to send all of this to us? Can you?
Yes.
Can you send all this to me? It's Lisa.
With pleasure. Yes, I recognize your voice too. So yes, with pleasure. I just want it to be clear that there are so many ways, to I'm going to say peel the orange. And I think that Newcastle really needs to stand up and say, in my book, this project has not begun to get past all environmental issues. There are plenty that as Sabrina states, question mark, never got really an answer. So it has to be a pause deck. But if part of this is going to be a deed restriction, that too, since it's Newcastle, there's so many issues that this community would want restricted that wouldn't come to mind, in a quick conversation.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
So that is my my simple. It wasn't simple, but I got halfway through. I'm happy to stop and write the rest to you, but I do think that wait. Yeah, I understand. To wait and show up.
I've taken a ton of notes, but I want to make sure we didn't miss anything because your comments are very well thought out and fulsome. So I want to make sure we don't miss any of them.
I have 30
and
30 more
certainly,
bullet
incorporate
send them
them
all to
into
you.
the letter that we're going to be sending them. So if you could send those to me, that would be really helpful.
It would be my pleasure to send them all to you. And then I just have a quick comment on a totally other. I know that the planning board is reviewing their processes and so forth. And I think I had mentioned at a prior town board meeting, it would be wonderful for them to have the option of, new business, old business, public comment. So many things slip by where they've stated, we're going to be watching you, and we reserve the right to revoke permits. But if there's no easy conversation that can be had publicly with the planning board, then they never know what's really going on.
Okay.
If if you all would consider the possibility of, each of your committees, each of your subboards has a public discussion opportunity the way you do, that would be wonderful.
Okay, we'll bring that up.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, good evening. Where is the zoning map showing the exact dimensions of the proposed moratorium? From the packet I saw, it was referenced but not included.
May not be in there.
It might not be in the packet,
I know that,
but we'll make sure it gets published.
I shouldn't say I know, I assume you're referring back to something that was already created, but there was a lot of confusion as to the dimensions even at the time of the form-based code on the North Greeley corridor. And for information purposes, I think having a specific map would be very helpful.
Okay, we'll make sure to get that out.
Thank you on that. And then there is wording in the proposed resolution about, I'm quoting here, about the substantial body of information amassed during review of the proposed form-based code. I don't know exactly what information that means, but if that wording is in reference to the FBC's generic environmental impact study, the GEIS should not be relied upon in any material respect for purposes of going forward discussing the future, whatever rezoning you're talking about for the North Greeley corridor, because that document was terribly, terribly done. And that was shown in detailed comments submitted during the seeker process. The failures of the GEIS include, but are certainly not limited to its so-called analysis of parking and traffic relating to the North Greeley corridor. And everybody who lives here now, or who comes to live here, deserves a downtown that functions. And those are, as I said, the GIS was an abject failure, but on parking and traffic, it was garbage. And I certainly hope the information that's referenced in that resolution doesn't include the GEIS from the form-based code. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. It was not the intention to incorporate that document. So Ed, you'll look at that language?
Sure.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, so now, I know you're excited. Can I have a motion to open the public hearing for the local law to expand 10% AFFH requirement to the BR and BRP zoning districts?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ed, is there anything you would like to say, or should we just get right to it?
I just want to point out that there's some correspondence in the packet starting at 92, 93. The most recent is a letter that Sabrina wrote to County Planning Commissioner that appears at page 94 of the packet. And that goes through, that essentially responds to the county's letter to the town board on the proposed legislation. Sabrina, in her letter, walks the county through the history and why the town code does not contain an overarching provision that applies AFFH everywhere. From the county's perspective, it's easy to understand why they'd like to see that. It's, just jumps right out and you can check that box and move on. But in Newcastle, we have these districts like the BR and BRP where residential development was possible, but they did not immediately get, they were not immediately subject to the AFFH requirement in 2011 when it was first implemented. The town has taken a more targeted approach in terms of implementing that requirement. So Sabrina's letter just walks the county through and ultimately makes the point that if the board does adopt the local law and does apply this requirement in these two districts, it will have applied the AFFH requirement in every residential or business district where this housing is actually buildable.
Mm-hmm.
Ed, I'm not sure, but you referenced a page number on the package I have. It's page, in the PDF anyway, it's page 55 of 69.
I'm looking at them, dinosaur.
Yeah,
looking
so
at the
just
paper.
in case anyone at home happens to be looking in the package, it's page 55 of the PDF that Ed's talking about.
All right, thank you. So now we'll open up to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Let's see. I think there's someone at the mic.
Can you just reiterate your
Sure.
name and address?
Okay, I'm Sidney Feinhersh. I live in the West End, 19 Carriage Hill, if that's part of the record. And I'm,
Is that
you
the
know,
south side of the West End?
the Lower West End.
Lower West.
There's a big difference between the Lower West End and the Upper West End. Anyway, so you know, when I presented to you and you asked me to be interviewed for the board, and by the way, I do appreciate you voting for me onto the board. Also, Nicole has left, but I want to thank Nicole for actually encouraging me to be on the board. And as I said before, that I am not speaking tonight for the board, though I do support the entire discussion that's gone on before. So let me just say that when I did present to you, I said there were 4 issues that I was concerned about. One was pedestrian safety, which is still an issue. I think I sent you all a copy of my my suggestions. Town cybersecurity, which I still am really in the dark about what is the protocol or position of town cybersecurity. Overdevelopment, and by that I mean overdevelopment, not development. Okay, a big difference in my mind. And the last one was affordable housing. And I said at the time that I wasn't going to speak about affordable housing because I thought that was a town issue and not a West End issue, though, of course, cybersecurity is also. So, but I'm here taking the advantage of the fact that you have legislation in front of you for affordable housing to actually speak to the issue. And now I want to really talk about my sense and feeling about that particular issue. Now, I should say I'm very proud to be on the board. I'm very proud to be here with you, and I really appreciate you allowing me to speak. And I do love living in this town. Okay, been here for 35 years. The question is, why did I first get active just a couple of years ago? And the reason why actually has to do with affordable housing. Because I suddenly realized, I should have realized before, that the town of Newcastle is one of the most segregated towns in this area. And I was ashamed of that, and I think everybody should be ashamed of that fact. Let me give you some numbers from the last census, going back before. Newcastle has African American population of 2.6, Latino population of 2.5. If you compare that to other towns in the area, Ossining, African American is 10.8, Latino is 33%, Yorktown, African American is 4.6, Latino is 4.2, Mount Kisco, African American is 4.1, Latino 41.7. Newcastle has gone from, in 2010, 1.6, big jump to 2.6, 1.6 to 2.6.
So do you have numbers for some other towns too, like Pleasantville and?
I couldn't get Pleasantville, and I don't have Bedford. I just tried to get a selection of towns that were immediate to us, and I thought Ossining is a very different place than Newcastle. We all understand, but a lot of these places are very similar and do have more broad population diversity. So that's why I picked those particular ones. Now, the question is, I'm not proposing that we become Ossining or Mount Kisco. What I'm proposing is that certainly if we have populations in these areas, why aren't they living, some of them at least living here? And of course, the reason is because Newcastle has had actually a long-standing position of actually opposing any type of multifamily affordable housing. And that goes back to some years ago when there was the standard excuse for this, and I'm going to use the excuse precisely, was a member of the board some years ago said, let the market work the way it works. In our town, there's no discrimination. It all comes down to money, whether you can afford it or not. The only color that matters is the color of your money. Now, I take that as a very good definition of structural racism. Let me just go on here. Let's see, yes, something else I wanted to, I think I skipped a page. Okay, if you take a look at the history of this town in terms of affordable housing, back in 1949, the town was opposed to multi-family housing for World War II veterans. So this goes way back in our history. This is not just the last election. Sorry for pages don't want to change here.
You know, in recent years, though, we've, you know.
Okay. In 1974, the supervisor of the town said affordable housing couldn't be built here. Why? The land was too rocky. Okay? In 1977, the town had 5 occasions in the previous 20 years to have multifamily housing built in the town. And it turned it down every one of those times, and it turned it down again in 1977. In 2008, Chappaqua Crossing was first considered for residents to have a certain amount of affordable housing. I'm going to assume properly that has in fact been fulfilled. But one resident of the town, happened to be a banker, said Chappaqua, and was opposed to that affordable housing at Chappaqua Crossing. And the reason was, Chappaqua is a family-oriented place, very much in love with its children and its schools. And one has to, with that statement, one has to suppose that banker thought that non-bankers didn't love their children and didn't want their children to go to good schools. Of course they do. In 2009, the desegregation plan had opponents, the federal imposed desegregation plan, had opponents in Chappaqua. And one resident said, I think it's hard to be in a town where your kids don't have what other kids have. She questioned whether the modest earners could thrive in a suburb if it couldn't afford a car or two for driving to work and ferrying children to play dates and sports practices.
Are you talking about what a resident may have said or what a town board
I have
did?
included both. Some of these I have
Okay.
identified which were residents and which were town board. Okay? And the type of crocodile tears also applied to the Hunts Lane project, where people were concerned that, they would be so separated from the rest of the town, that the ambulances couldn't get through, or the fire engine couldn't get through. Well, the developer at that time actually had video of the town fire engine passing directly under that stone bridge, which was considered to be the obstacle. So what I'm saying here is that there's a long-standing opposition to affordable housing and diversity and multi-level family housing. So,
But you know that project was built, and to consider safety of its residents is actually of the utmost importance.
sure it is, except if it's a way to prevent the housing from being built.
It wasn't.
Okay, that particular, now you can correct me here, that project took 8 years. Thank you.
That project was also proposed to be moved to a place that made much more sense to move that.
Well, why not-
And the
well, let's go build
developers
it.
chose not to do that.
Let's go build the other property as well. I have no problem with that.
So can I
let's come-
take it you're in favor of this law?
I'm in favor of this law. Now, I have some questions. Let me just say that, of course, one of the reasons I was involved in the campaign was because, as a proponent of affordable housing, I thought the uniform-based code was the best possibility of attracting developers to build diversity in the town and multifamily affordable housing. In fact, So that was defeated. Okay, that was defeated. I'm not going to bring it up again. We already talked about it tonight. But it was, to me, it was a modest attempt to try and take one section of town and provide a real-life experiment on getting some diversity in this town. Now, what we have in front of us right now is the accessory dwelling units, which I believe that the board also opposed.
We have accessory dwelling unit legislation on our books since the
Senator
70s.
Harcum resolution and the Governor Focal's mandate. By the way, I don't see what the problem is with mandates. To oppose a mandate to me is like saying, well, we're for states' rights. You know, it's a kind of thing. We're not, opposed to any diversity. What we're opposed to is we want to protect our state rights. When you say mandate, now, by the way, I was very thankful that the governor mandated masks in the grocery stores. First time in the pandemic, I felt like I was safe going to the Chico, okay? Because that was mandated. I have no problem with the mandate. The question is, what is the mandate for? Does it move us forward? And I think a mandate, even for, a mandate for accessory dwelling units would be a perfectly reasonable thing to accept. And I think the board, without a mandate, should move ahead very rapidly to see that we do have ADUs. There's also the question of a thing that's not even drafted yet, which is the resident transit-oriented development. I think it's just in a proposal stage. There's no legislation involved with it. But, it strikes me as bizarre in this particular age, not only of needing affordable housing in this town, but also green, development, that having more spread out housing around the around the train station with bus stops so that people didn't have to use their cars to get to the station would be a great idea of achieving both diversity, affordable housing, and also green policy in transportation in the town. Now, I do support the expanded 10% affordable housing. I do have questions about it. One thing, I haven't been able to figure out where these zoning districts are. I don't know. I've tried researching and I've asked certain questions. I haven't gotten any answers about that. Where exactly are they? I don't know. How big are they? Are they attractive?
So we had, just to interrupt for 1 second, there was a map. I don't
haven't
know
been
if
able
it's
to
in the
find it.
current packet, but I've seen that map.
I don't think it's in the pack. It's also on the town website. So if you go under the Development Department tab,
Okay.
under zoning,
It-
you can pull it
It
up.
shows
Fine.
those areas very specifically, both
it.
in the Chappaqua
I
and the
will look.
Millwood
I
hamlets.
appreciate knowing where it is. I'd like to
And
know
didn't
where
we
it
have
is.
that in the previous meeting
It's
packet?
been in a prior
It's
packet.
been in a prior packet, so we can,
Okay.
we can direct you to
It
that.
was before I was on the mailing list. Also, there's a question of whether that proposal is actually attractive to developers. And I'm willing to give it a test, but what I really want to see is that test should have a limit of time. If developers don't take the bait, we should come up with something new and something else. I don't know what that is. I'm not expert enough to know, but there should be something to replace that if developers, since we are going to oppose any subsidized housing in the town, I would like to see making a package that would be attractive enough that developers would, in fact, create some affordable housing in town. Multifamily, also very good for, can I speak personally, for older people who are living on fixed incomes and are going to have a problem staying in town unless affordable housing becomes available to them. Okay? That's it.
Thank you so
I'd like to
much.
say something rather personal, and I don't really like to do this during public comment, but I've had many occasions, because I was not in favor of the form-based code. I was not in favor of the 900 luxury apartments that would be necessary to build 100 affordable housing units. So I am in favor of diversity, but I would like you and, people who are tempted to come and, talk about the history of racism that might have existed here. I just want you to be aware that I am a black woman in this town. I'm
Okay.
from Haiti. I'm a black woman despite my, my complexion. You may not really realize that, but I've had many occasions when I've had white residents throw these facts at me as if,
Right.
we somehow bear responsibility
No.
for what has come before. We are concerned with the future and building what we think would be a more diverse and enriched
Je suis
area.
heureux
But
de le
this-
savoir. D'accord?
Merci beaucoup. But I just want you to be aware of the context
Now,
of your
I
words
did
and
not-
who you're addressing. I know it's not personal, but everyone here, although they're not of my background, wants the same thing. So when we have to hear about the sins of the past, yes, it is a context for, where we are
Right.
today, but it does not indicate our intent to move forward.
I have not impugned your intent. I have not impugned anybody personally. What I have said is that there is a history of opposition to affordable housing and diversity in this town. It goes back a long way. It's not any one person. There are people who spoke out, and
Right, but you're not seeing this here at this table.
I didn't say I was. Okay?
I-
And in fact, I said I
need to make
support
that
this
clear.
proposal for
Okay.
10% affordable housing. So it's not directed at anyone personally on this board.
That wasn't clear to me. That's why I
Okay,
made
well,
my
there it
comment.
is, okay?
Okay.
So I welcome your comment, okay? And certainly I did not mean it in any form of that way, okay? As directed to people on the board, okay? Any other questions for me?
Thank you.
Right, thank you so much for your comments. Okay, any other comments on this proposal before the board? Okay, thank you. Hi, Holly.
Hi, you guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, my picture is wrong. I apologize. I am speaking only as myself as a resident. I wanted to thank you guys for looking at ways to consider increasing affordable housing in Newcastle. Because as you well know, Westchester County is in the midst of a housing crisis, and we're falling well short of the present day need in affordable units. Unfortunately, our current zoning is already structured with limitations that challenge developers to find projects worthy of investment in our hamlet. And in the absence of a study and a holistic update of our code, this additional requirement is likely to deter the development of new housing units rather than add the affordable housing units to our town that we need. Of course, you know this because your staff expert, the Director of Planning, Sabrina Charney-Hull, has already told you this. Making this change seems to be more about a hypothetical unit that may have existed when we look in hindsight at 91 Bedford. And there's really nothing right now that supports the likelihood of success in the future if you add this. I think if we really want to make a statement that Newcastle supports affordable housing, I think it's more worth all of our time and effort to table this incremental and potentially detrimental change and pursue affordable housing by increasing the permissible density and making development attractive by revising the zoning code more holistically. Thanks.
Thank you, Holly. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Rob Fleischer, Oak Hill Road, Chappaqua, New York. I just want you to, I've listened to different portions of the meeting tonight. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you.
We hear you fine.
And, a couple things that came to mind, the idea of, I understand that development in a hamlet such as ours, where there are only a certain number of lots that are really can make even a dent of being able to even sustain more than 15, 20 units to begin with, is not easy. And I get concerned when people say we should table the 10% allocation that's in the current proposed legislation, because what that would do would be to ensure that any development that happens going forward until there's something else is completed would contain no affordable units at all, because no one's going to volunteer these things. So every time that gets brought up, I do get concerned that that aspect of the statement the circle isn't completed, you know, when that suggestion is made. So I think that would really be a bad idea. So I think it's important to have this kind of, for whatever else is going to happen in the future, you know, I look at this as something that makes sure that a conversation is going to take place about affordable housing, and that people who do develop here for anything of size, you know, greater than 5 units, know that there's an expectation that the town expects there to be an affordable, an AFFH unit as part of that development. Now, maybe, you know, there's something that doesn't work about that, and through the conversations, it's still determined that it's a benefit to the community to have this type of development. But you want that conversation to take place. And without this legislation, the conversation will not take place. And so whatever other zoning changes are made, you know, it's I think you need to have this in place now and as soon as possible, so that nothing else does slip between the cracks, and that anybody who is thinking about developing here understands that that's, you know, that is an expectation of the town in terms of what they're looking to achieve going forward. I also wanted to comment on the, you know, one of the reasons why, you know, these units can be difficult to do is because anytime you add affordable units, it certainly does take down the economics of any kind of project. I certainly understand that. And I'm going to keep on mentioning this every time this comes up, because when the ADU unit legislation came up, they talked about attaching a certain amount, I think it was like 80 something million dollars, to help with the construction of some of those units in exchange for them being affordable. And that was kind of on a single unit by unit basis. And I really wish that, you know, the funding mechanisms that the state has in place would be more flexible to allow for more affordable units, you know, to be put into place on any type of size of development. And I think that would really help unlock the construction of more affordable units in towns that have a scale and size and topography that both Chapel and Millwood hamlets have. Because neither one of those hamlets has huge lots where you're going to see really large buildings go in without being totally out of scale. But if there was more flexibility, and, you know, maybe there is out there, but it's just not obvious, to allow for, you know, as opposed to if you had a 10-unit building, to allow not just for 1 unit, but, you know, to allow maybe for 2 or 3 units, because there's a subsidized fund that's out there by the state where they would usually do it for funding, you know, large developments, but they can do it for individual units. I think that would really help our developers, you know, make all these numbers kind of add up, so they can find a way to both develop units and make more of those units affordable. So I am in favor of this legislation. I think it'd be really short-sighted not to have it. And I want to keep on pushing us to explore ways where our elected officials can simplify and make more flexible the process for funding these individual units on a unit-by-unit basis, similar to how Senator Harkin mentioned that they might be willing to do it for ADUs. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone else, Carrie? All right. Okay, so now that we've had this public hearing a few weeks, can we close the public hearing and leave it open for written comments for a week?
That sounds appropriate.
All right, so can I have a motion to close the public hearing and leave it open for written comments until 12 p.m. on Monday? How does that sound? Or 5 p.m. on Monday?
This coming Monday.
For the 14th, Lisa, at 5 p.m.?
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. Someone
So
make that
moved.
motion?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
You don't want to close the public hearing?
No, I think it should remain open. I don't think this law will do much, have any practical impact, and I think it's still something that we need to work through to make sure that it's a viable, successful means to make affordable housing in holistic conjunction with other zoning changes.
Okay,
But we don't need to go into it. I've already voiced that.
okay.
I don't
Thank you.
understand, so I'm just trying to understand what the public hearing does, actually.
It
Why
gets
would
us
the
public
public-
input,
Right.
which is we're required before we consider adopting a law.
I totally,
And then by closing the public hearing allows us to move to the next step to consider adoption of that law.
right, but based on Jeremy's comment, I just want to be sure that, we've gotten information within the public hearing structure, but we can certainly continue to get information. I'm trying to figure out why we can't continue to work on this.
It doesn't
With the
mean that we
with the
can't
closing of the
continue
public
to
hearing.
consider zoning changes.
Of course,
Right.
that's separate and apart, but
So
yes, I do
I'm
think.
not quite
it's-
sure.
I think it's pretty clear that I think it should remain open so that we can continue these public engagements in this manner before we move the ball
I see.
forward.
I
I don't think that we've done it adequately. If it was such a hot issue, we'd have more than one individual who thankfully showed up today and 2 or 3 people voicing their opinion online. So I do think there's still ample opportunity for input and people who would have very valuable input. We just need to get them here, and I think we should make more efforts before we close the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
So then I would suggest if there are any written comments that we want to bring to or the board feels it needs to discuss further, you could do that next week at a work session. Otherwise, I'd anticipate having a resolution adopting the local law at your following meeting.
Perfect. So by closing it Monday, that allows us to then consider any other comments by Tuesday. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move to our public hearing on a local law to create Chapter 6 of the Code of the Town of Newcastle to establish an alternate board member position of the town on the Town of Newcastle Planning Board. Can I have a motion to open that public hearing?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ed, do you want to talk to that?
Yes, I do, because I noted that in the packet, there's a prior version, or the original version of the local law. And last week, you mentioned earlier that the town board had a joint meeting with the planning board, and there was a good discussion about what this local law was intended to accomplish and what it should do. And my takeaway from that joint meeting was that the alternate member of the planning board really ought to be used in 2 situations. 1, if there's a recusal by a regular member, and 2, if there's an occasion where a regular member is going to be absent for an extended period of time. So the revised version, which I've emailed, we circulated on Friday. Again, apologies, it didn't make it into the packet Friday afternoon, but I've circulated it to the town board. You should all have it now in email. The only change we've made is to section 6.3. And just so the record and anyone watching can be clear, the change essentially allows the planning board chairman to designate the alternate in those 2 situations. 1, a regular member is unable to participate because of a recusal, or the regular member becomes unable to attend 2 or more consecutive meetings. Those are the situations that it would be limited to. So with that, I'll turn it back to the board.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on that before we open the? All right, so does anyone have any public comments on this legislation? Carrie, anyone online? All right.
I'm sorry, Ed, what would be the date of the most recent version?
Friday. It was 3/4. I'll send it to you.
Okay, thank you.
So can we also make sure just to run this by the planning board, because I know they had comments on this.
This version, sure.
Yeah, at our meeting. But I know that not that I want to speak for the planning board, but my takeaway from the meeting last week was that they actually are in favor of this position as something that could help in the case of recusal, or if there's a long-term illness or any other reason why someone couldn't continue to attend planning board meetings. All right, so then why don't we make a
Adjourn.
motion to, well, do you want to adjourn? We've had this open now for 2 weeks, right?
Only if you get some more comments from the planning board and want to go back into the legislation, it might be better to leave it open.
Okay, so let's, I guess, leave this open pending planning board comments, but they can send us written comments, correct?
They can, and I would suggest doing this informally as opposed to, so if we continue this public hearing for 2 weeks, I want to.
Yeah, do it on March 22nd, so we're with everything else. Okay, so this is continued.
Okay, so pending their comments on the actual legislation. All right, so can I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing on this local law to March
22nd.
22nd?
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And finally, we have a public hearing with respect to a local law to amend Chapter 9 of the Town Code concerning the membership and powers of the Board of Ethics of the Town of Newcastle. Can I have a motion to open that public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ed?
So this local law was a follow-on to the social media policy that the town adopted last month. It empowers the ethics board to issue advisory reports or opinions, I should say, with respect to compliance with the social media policy. It also eliminated the provision with respect to alternate members and increased the membership, the regular membership of the ethics board from 5 to 7. So those are the two things that the local law proposes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone on the board need any clarification? Okay, is there anyone who would like to speak about this proposed local law? Carrie, anyone online? Okay. I know we did contact, I did speak with the chair of the ethics board about this as well, and he was in favor of this. And actually very glad we adopted a social media policy as well.
This may be one where the board wants to entertain a motion to close the public hearing, leave it open for written comment until Monday, and we'd have a resolution, unless you hear something that causes you to want to revisit this, we'd have a resolution adopting a local law at the next meeting.
Okay.
The 22nd.
Yes.
But we'd hold it open for written comments until also the 14th.
14th at 5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Same as the other. That way we could discuss anything that comes in on Tuesday the 15th. Okay, good.
Can someone make that
So
motion?
moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, well, that ends our public hearing portion of the meeting. And now we're just going to move to resolutions. We did talk about taking out the police.
Right, so you've got it. It's in your emails. It's
Oh,
been
did
emailed
you
to
just send that? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so who has the resolutions open and would like to start? for
All
it.
right, I move to accept the retirement of Craig Davenport from the position of police officer within the Newcastle Police Department effective March 26, 2022. The town would like to sincerely thank Craig for his 22 years of dedicated service to the town. He absolutely will be missed, and he's done a tremendous and terrific job for our community, so thank you so much.
Second.
Don't do it.
Do it? All right, I don't second. Take it back.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 we get a
And
sec-
thank you again for your service. You will be missed. Yes, Chris Smith, seconded.
Okay, on the flip, we have someone new coming in, not to fill Mr. Davenport's shoes, but to authorize the hiring of Jason Guchek, possibly, I apologize if I've said that incorrectly, to the position of fourth grade police officer within the Newcastle Police Department, the annual salary of $75,573, effective April 3rd, 2022, or the date Westchester County approves of resignation or reinstatement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and welcome to town.
I move to authorize the hiring of Bosco Castillo to the position of seasonal labor with the Recreation and Parks Department, the hourly rate of $15 per hour, effective March 21st of this year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of Charlotte Tasson to the position of part-time receptionist within the town clerk's office at a rate of $18 per hour, effective March 7th of this year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, anyone else like to go? We can do the rest as the consent. Does anyone else?
Have that up.
What would-
I don't have that up.
I have it.
You have it?
Perfect.
Okay. I move to adopt the consent agenda as submitted, consisting of the following: authorization to accept retirement police,
Skip.
authorization to hire police, authorization to hire parks seasonal laborer, authorization to hire part-time receptionist clerk, authorization to appoint intern, authorization to appoint Adam Silver as student member of the SAB, authorization to accept resignation of the BAB, adoption of minutes January 2022, authorization to enter into an agreement, Auctions International, authorization to declare surplus DPW, authorization to declare surplus EV chargers, authorization to obtain bids water treatment chemicals, authorization to obtain bids water maintenance materials, authorization to approve 2022 annual ECI increase, Suez, authorization to retain professional services, ground penetrating radar systems, formerly New York leak detection, authorization to use town property, Wall Street rides FAR, authorization to award bid Hubbard's Cupboard, authorization to attend conference planning, revised resolution regarding purchase of police vehicle, authorization to attend conference DPW, authorization to enter into agreement Willowbrook Swim Club, authorization to accept proposal for engineering design services for the proposed culvert replacement, Tectonic Engineering, authorization to create capital project rehabilitation of Amsterdam Soccer Field Number 1, authorization to remit payment for East of Hudson Corporation operations and maintenance, authorization to award contract for engineering services, Bedford Hills Pump Station, authorization to purchase T2 Luke 2 pay station.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One last resolution.
This one.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's actually
Two.
two.
Resolution authorizing a further modification to cash bond agreement with SG Chappaqua B LLC. Whereas by resolution adopted on January 25, 2022, the town board authorized certain modifications to the cash bond agreement between the town and SG Chappaqua B LLC concerning certain improvements to the Sawmill River Parkway described in Condition 65 of the Site Development Plan approval for Chappaqua Crossing Retail Development dated December 16, 2015, last amended March 17, 2020, which required completion of the SMRP improvements to the satisfaction of the New York State Department of Transportation as secured by the cash bond agreement. Whereas Toll Brothers, Inc. and KL Toll Fort A4 LLC as contract vendee of the East Village Residential Subdivision at Chappaqua Crossing, has requested a further amendment to said cash bond agreement to align its rights and obligations thereunder with the Newcastle Planning Board's resolution dated September 8, 2021, wherein the Planning Board amended the Retail Site Development Plan Resolution to shift Condition 65 of the Retail Site Development Plan Resolution to the Site Development Plan approval for the Chappaqua Crossing East Village dated April 20, 2021 as Condition 57A, and now therefore it is hereby resolved, the first decretal paragraph of the Town Board's January 25 resolution is stricken and replaced with the following. Therefore, it is hereby resolved, the Town Board of the Town of Newcastle hereby authorizes amendment, subject to review and approval as to form and substance by the Town Attorney, of the cash bond agreement to, 1, make Toll Brothers a party thereto, and require Toll Brothers to perform under the cash bond agreement in the event that CLS Chappaqua 1A LLC fails to satisfy its obligations under the cash bond agreement pursuant to Condition 57A, and make the escrow funds available to Toll Brothers for its costs incurred in performing the SMRP improvements pursuant to the cash bond agreement, and in such event, Toll Brothers shall be required to complete the SMRR improvements within the time frame prescribed by Condition 57A of the East Village Site Development Plan Resolution, and 2, establish a 6-month cure period for completion of the SMRP improvements by CLS Chappaqua 1IA LLC, which cure period shall be available in the event that said entity commences such work no later than May 1st, 2022, and completion is thereafter delayed past August 31, 2022, due to unforeseen circumstances beyond its control. And be it further resolved that all other conditions and terms of the Town Board's January 25, 2022 resolution remain in full force and effect without modification.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And there's one more resolution with the police. Do you want to do that one?
I move to adopt the following resolution. Whereas a disciplinary proceeding was commenced as fully stated in the agenda, whereas as a result thereof, Kenneth Bernstein Esquire was duly designated as the hearing officer, whereas the hearing officer has rendered findings of facts and recommendations based upon the record presented, and whereas the Town Board of the Town of Newcastle has had an opportunity to review the record in this matter, as well as the findings of fact and recommendations of the hearing officer. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Newcastle hereby adopts the hearing officer's findings of fact and determinations as to guilt on the charges and specifications preferred in which he found guilt as more fully set forth in the decision of the hearing officer dated January 12, 2022, and also hereby adopts the hearing officer's findings of fact and determinations as to innocence on the charges and specifications preferred in which he found innocence as more fully set forth in the decision of the hearing officer dated January 12, 2022. And be it further resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Newcastle hereby adopts the recommendation of the hearing officer as to an appropriate penalty and finds itself that the penalty of termination is appropriate. And be it further resolved that the town clerk is hereby directed to forward a certified copy of this resolution, together with a copy of the hearing officer's decision and a copy of the record in this matter to the Personnel Office of Westchester County, and all of the above as more fully set forth in the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and can I have a motion to close our meeting?
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for attending.